Chapter 16. Xiao Yan waited for Yuan Qing to leave before his gaze landed on the shattered mountain. Xiao Yan's gaze was fiery and his blood was boiling. After confirming that there was no one else around, he flew towards a huge crack in the mountain. After Xiao Yan entered, there was a spacious cave. Dozens of people were standing side by side in a horizontal row. As soon as Xiao Yan entered, an invisible heat wave rushed towards him. Xiao Yan ignored it and was pleasantly surprised. With a wave of his hand, a fiery light screen appeared around him and enveloped Xiao Yan. The heat wave surged and bombarded the fiery light screen. With a bang, ripples burst out like water and then dissipated into thin air. Xiao Yan frowned. He didn't expect the heat wave to not only have the ability to reflect attacks like the barrier outside, but it could also counterattack on its own. Fortunately, the power of these attacks wasn't great. At least for now, it wasn't enough to break through Xiao Yan's fighting chi barrier. Xiao Yan walked forward within the cave. However, Xiao Yan discovered that the further he walked, the stronger the heat wave that whizzed out of the cave became. It directly bombarded the Do Chi light barrier that Xiao Yan had placed, causing it to repeatedly tremble. However, Xiao Yan completely ignored all of this. All he did was continue to walk forward. However, from Xiao Yan's tightly furrowed brows, it could be seen that Xiao Yan's heart wasn't as calm as he appeared on the surface. At this moment, Xiao Yan's heart was filled with shock. This was because whenever the heat wave bombarded his fiery light screen, Xiao Yan could discover that whenever the heat wave exploded, there would be a wisp of flame that Xiao Yan couldn't detect fusing into the fiery light screen that he had set up. At first, Xiao Yan thought that it was a wisp of the heavenly flame's origin and that it was a great opportunity. Xiao Yan didn't reject it and absorbed it all into his heavenly flame. However, after Xiao Yan absorbed a small portion, Xiao Yan was shocked to discover that the heavenly flame's origin wasn't something that he had obtained by chance. Instead, the heavenly flame spirit wanted to use this to seize the heavenly flame in Xiao Yan's body. Xiao Yan also wanted to isolate himself from all of this. However, Xiao Yan was even more surprised to discover that he was unable to separate the heavenly flame from his body. Instead, the bone-chilling flame within his body was being repeatedly swallowed. In just a moment, more than half of the bone-freezing fire had been devoured and it was impossible to return. This was because the cave passage behind Xiao Yan was already filled with raging flames. If he wanted to return, he had to break through the sea of fire. However, with Xiao Yan's strength, Xiao Yan didn't have the slightest confidence that he could get out. Hence, he could only continue moving forward. Xiao Yan's expression was grave. At this moment, Xiao Yan had finally reached the end of the heat wave. However, at the end of the heat wave, Xiao Yan didn't discover any useful information. There wasn't even the shadow of the heavenly flame. Xiao Yan stood at the end of the tunnel. In front of Xiao Yan was a bottomless abyss. The abyss gave Xiao Yan a feeling of death just by looking at it. It was obvious that it was a no-fly zone. Even if it was Xiao Yan, it was impossible for him to stay in the void for even a minute or a second. Only the stone platform that was suspended in the void, which meandered upwards, gave people a feeling that they had come back from the jaws of death. Xiao Yan looked at the top of the stone platform. At the highest point of the stone platform, there was a platform. There was a faintly discernible flame. The flame was very dim, but it illuminated the entire cave. Around the stone platform, there were 6 icicles. The icicles were connected and emitted raging flames. Xiao Yan couldn't see the contents of the icicles under the cover of the flames. However, he was sure that the 6 icicles weren't ordinary objects. There were flame seals engraved on the stone platforms that were about 10 feet wide. Waves of extremely hot aura surged from them, causing Xiao Yan's scalp to tingle. However, when Xiao Yan saw the figure on the opposite stone wall, he was slightly stunned. It was a huge stone sculpture. The entire stone sculpture was silver white and emitted a sparkling light. The content of the stone sculpture was an old man. His face was no different from an ordinary old man, but he stood there proudly. Although his eyes were also carved from stone, he still gave people a feeling that he was looking down on the world. His clothes were not decorated with any colors. His hands that were carved from stone formed a strange hand seal. It was filled with an incomparably mysterious feeling, causing Xiao Yan's eyebrows to involuntarily furrow. There was only one part of the stone sculpture that had color. That was his hair. A head of silver white and bright ice blue hair that was like jade. Although it was cast from stone, the silver white hair could be seen. Xiao Yan stood on the spot in a daze. His eyes were wide open and his face was filled with disbelief as he looked at the stone sculpture. Only after a long while did he spit out 2 words in shock. Tu Shi, Ancient Emperor. At the same time, in an ice blue hall, an old man wearing a white long robe and ice blue hair suddenly opened his eyes that were originally tightly shut. Looking at the old man's appearance, he was actually exactly the same as the stone sculpture. The old man narrowed his eyes as he looked at the dome of the hall. That direction was where Xiao Yan was at. There was some joy in the old man's eyes, but there was also a faint reluctance. The corner of his mouth slightly lifted into a smile as if he had been relieved of a heavy burden. Immediately after, the old man's heroic voice resounded within the hall. Haha, it's been more than 10 years. You've finally come. Haha, old fellows, let's see which one of you can compare to this old man this time. Haha. The old man took a few more glances at the direction where Xiao Yan was at, then closed his turbid eyes once again. He concentrated on his cultivation and quietly waited for Xiao Yan's arrival. The hall instantly calmed down along with the old man's silence. Only the sound of the old man's breathing could be heard in every corner of the hall. Xiao Yan frowned as he looked at the huge stone sculpture opposite him, especially the face of the old man and his head full of ice blue silver hair. A surprised expression surfaced on Xiao Yan's delicate and pretty face. He did not expect that the Tushi ancient emperor had actually come here before. Perhaps this was a place of inheritance that he had left behind. Speaking of which, I can be considered as half a disciple of the Tushi ancient emperor. Hee, Tushi ancient emperor, this junior will not be courteous about your inheritance. When Xiao Yan thought that it might be the place of inheritance of the Tushi ancient emperor, he could not help but become excited in his heart. He continuously rubbed his palms together, looking like a professional thief. He was not serious at all. However, in the next instant, Xiao Yan once again became serious. Since it was the inheritance left behind by the Tushi ancient emperor, it must be something extraordinary. No wonder he had sensed an extremely terrifying heavenly flames aura earlier. It seemed that the inheritance inside was not easy to obtain. Xiao Yan glanced at the endless abyss, then looked at the many stone platforms that were floating in the air. After hesitating for a moment, he walked towards the first stone platform. When he walked closer, Xiao Yan was finally able to see the stone platform clearly. It turned out that there was a thin black metal chain in each of the 4 directions of the stone platform. It hung down to the depths of the abyss that Xiao Yan could not see. Between every 2 stone platforms, there was also a pitch-black metal chain that connected them, all the way to the highest platform that was emitting bursts of fiery light. There were also many profound and mysterious runes carved on the chains. Those runes would occasionally emit waves of weak energy light, causing the entire space to appear incomparably mysterious. Xiao Yan's expression was a little grave as he muttered to himself in his heart. I did not expect that there would actually be such a huge formation here. Looks like it will be a little difficult to pass through this stage. The first stage is already so difficult. I really don't know how difficult the later stages will be. TSK, Tushi ancient emperor, you are clearly making things difficult for others. Xiao Yan thought as he shook his head and sighed. Xiao Yan walked to the front of the endless abyss. The corner of his mouth could not help but twitch slightly, and his heart was also slightly agitated. Xiao Yan calmed down slightly and stared at the first stone platform. His legs bent slightly, and his body bent forward. His feet stomped on the ground, and his entire body immediately flew towards the stone platform that was only 30 to 40 feet away from him. The perfect arc that Xiao Yan imagined did not appear. Instead, when he was halfway there, Xiao Yan's body began to fall downwards. In the midst of Xiao Yan's shock, Xiao Yan's descending foot once again stomped heavily on the dark black metal chain. Xiao Yan's falling body finally flew up again. In the end, he narrowly landed on the edge of the stone platform. The instant Xiao Yan landed, Xiao Yan's body involuntarily sank downwards. However, Xiao Yan did not pay too much attention to it. Instead, he looked back with a face full of luck. However, when he looked back, Xiao Yan actually saw that the originally pitch-black metal chain was currently emitting a faint and weak light. At this moment, the metal chain that Xiao Yan was on in several directions of the stone platform was also emitting light from the point of contact with the stone platform. At a speed that was visible to the naked eye, it gradually extended into the distance. It was likely that not long later, the metal chain that covered the entire cave would emit a bright light. Xiao Yan's expression instantly became serious when he saw this. Once the metal chain emitted light, it meant that the mysterious formation in the cave was about to be activated. At that time, it would be really difficult to deal with. Xiao Yan turned his head and frowned as he thought carefully. After which, he wanted to stand up. However, it caused his expression to change slightly. In the next moment, however, the corner of his mouth was lifted into a smile. His body suddenly shook as he stood up. He ignored the strong suction force that was transmitted from his feet and the enormous pressure that was transmitted from his body. He directly walked toward the stone platform in front of him as if the pressure on the stone platform was nothing. It should be known that Xiao Yan was a strong person who trained both Do Qi and physical body. How could his physical strength be suppressed by this little pressure? With his first experience, Xiao Yan also gradually became familiar with the situation on the stone platform. Although the pressure on the stone platforms grew stronger with each step, it was not difficult for Xiao Yan. However, Xiao Yan also discovered that each time he stepped on a stone platform, the metal chains surrounding the stone platform would be activated. From there, it would begin to emit light and extend into the distance. This caused Xiao Yan to feel a little anxious in his heart. Xiao Yan continued to leap forward time and time again. Xiao Yan was finally only one step away from the final stone platform. As long as he took this step, he would only be one step away from that platform. A comfortable smile surfaced on Xiao Yan's face that was covered in sweat. However, when Xiao Yan looked at the surrounding metal chains that were originally dark black in color, his expression became ugly again. Xiao Yan took a heavy step forward, one step at a time. It could be seen that at this very moment, even Xiao Yan's strength was not as great as he wished. Bang! Xiao Yan half-knelt on the ground as he panted heavily. The sweat on his face continuously dripped onto the ground like blooming chrysanthemums. Xiao Yan's expression was grave. His eyebrows were tightly knitted together as he looked at the platform that was only 90 feet away from him. His teeth creaked as he gritted them. Xiao Yan raised his head and looked at the platform that was close at hand. He then looked at the large formation that was about to form around him. He steeled his heart and his hands suddenly pushed against the ground. His body that was originally half kneeling on the ground forcefully stood up. His gaze was resolute as he looked at the platform opposite him. Because the platform was rather high, Xiao Yan could not see what exactly was on the stone platform. However, as long as he reached the platform, he would not be far from the heavenly flame. Thinking of this, Xiao Yan's gaze became even more determined. His gaze towards the platform became even more hopeful. Xiao Yan walked step by step towards the opposite edge of the stone platform. The light on the surrounding metal chains continued to extend. It was only at this moment that Xiao Yan realized that the ends of the metal chains were actually connected to the 6 icicles. At this moment, the 6 icicles were also emitting waves of sparkling and translucent light, resonating with the lustrous metal chains. Xiao Yan's expression changed once again. His footsteps quickened as he walked to the edge of the stone platform. Looking at the platform that was slightly higher than the stone platform, he took a deep breath. His body bent forward once again. His legs were slightly bent and in an instant, he suddenly shot towards the platform. Chapter 17. Xiao Yan looked at the platform that was getting closer and closer to him. He looked at the faint fluorescent light that was about to come into contact with the 6 icicles. His heart was extremely anxious. Almost there. Almost there. Just a little more. Finally, following the shout in Xiao Yan's heart, Xiao Yan finally landed on the platform before the fluorescent light and the icicles came into contact. Xiao Yan glanced at the fluorescent light that was about to come into contact with the icicles and turned his head to look at the center of the platform. However, he was slightly stunned. The center of the platform was not the heavenly flame that should have been there. Instead, it was a vertical hole that led downwards. The hole had a diameter of several feet and was completely icy blue in color. It emitted a faint light that illuminated the top of the hole, causing it to be dazzling and dazzling. Xiao Yan was, after all, an experienced person. After being stunned for a few breaths, he stomped his feet on the ground and rushed toward the hole. He was only a few feet away from the hole. However, at the most critical moment, the entire platform that Xiao Yan was on suddenly emitted a bright light. A light pillar shot toward the sky, causing Xiao Yan's eyes to involuntarily narrow. Xiao Yan roared in his heart. His charging body did not retreat but instead advanced. His feet once again stomped heavily on the ground and he shot toward the light pillar with even greater ferocity. However, just as Xiao Yan was about to enter the light pillar, Xiao Yan's expression suddenly changed. His palm suddenly struck forward and heavily struck the light pillar in front of him. Bang! An earth-shattering sound was emitted from the place where Xiao Yan's palm struck. A huge rebounding force shook Xiao Yan until the blood in his body churned non-stop. His body only stopped when he was pushed back to the edge of the platform. At this moment, Xiao Yan naturally knew what had happened. Xiao Yan's eyes narrowed as he looked at the light pillar in front of him. The dou qi in his body slowly circulated throughout his entire body. A moment later, the light pillar gradually dissipated, revealing what was within. Opposite Xiao Yan, in front of the hole, there were 6 ice dragons that were several thousand feet long surrounding it. The huge dragons let out waves of low roars and emitted waves of icy aura, causing some fine ice shards to appear in the air. However, the moment the ice shards appeared, they were swallowed by a wild heat and turned into waves of fog that rose and dissipated into the air. At this point, if Xiao Yan still could not recognize what kind of heavenly flame that was sealed by himself, it would really tarnish Xiao Yan's title as the Flame Emperor. The moment Xiao Yan saw the 6 ice dragons, he knew what kind of heavenly flame was in this mountain. The heavenly flame in this place was obviously one of the heavenly flames that Xiao Yan had interacted with for the longest time. It was also the first heavenly flame that Xiao Yan had seen, the bone-chilling flame. I didn't expect that the heavenly flame sealed in this place would actually be the bone-chilling flame. From the looks of it, if I want to obtain this bone-chilling flame, I will have to pass through this stage first. Xiao Yan looked at the 6 ice dragons, shook his head and sighed. He immediately raised his Do Qi and prepared for the upcoming battle. The 6 ice dragons also seemed to know that Xiao Yan was about to start the battle. Therefore, their huge bodies that were originally coiled around each other also began to twist, emitting waves of frightening dragon aura that caused one's heart to palpitate. With Xiao Yan's strength, he could naturally feel that the strength of these 6 ice dragons had likely reached the Do Di level. Even if they were compared to him, they were likely only slightly weaker. I didn't expect the ice dragon condensed from the formation to be so powerful. It even has a trace of the Dragon Clan's pressure. It seems that this formation is not simple. Xiao Yan quietly sighed in his heart as he sensed the frightening dragon might on the body of the ice dragon. Xiao Yan looked at the 6 enormous dragons and a fiery fighting intent suddenly erupted from his eyes. His body flashed and he suddenly charged toward the 6 ice dragons. His fist smashed toward the enormous dragon leading the group. That enormous dragon did not show any signs of weakness. Its enormous dragon claw was suddenly clenched into a fist as it met Xiao Yan's fist. The fist collided and a thunder-like explosion resounded over the cave, causing the entire cave to rumble. Xiao Yan and the enormous dragon each took a step back. The enormous dragon swung its enormous body and once again charged toward Xiao Yan with its claw. Xiao Yan let out a loud laugh. A thought passed through his mind and a bright golden light was emitted from his body. A majestic dragon might was being emitted from his body. Xiao Yan let out a long roar to the sky. Suddenly, a wild and arrogant dragon roar reverberated within the mountain cave. Even the entire mountain began to tremble intensely. The golden light scattered and Xiao Yan's entire body was covered with purple gold dragon scales. However, this was not the end. Xiao Yan's hand was still repeatedly changing seals. The originally dim golden light suddenly became bright once again. Xiao Yan's body also began to change, gradually becoming taller. Within a short couple of breaths, Xiao Yan had transformed into a 99-foot-tall golden giant. Xiao Yan looked at the enormous dragon that had flown in front of him. He threw a punch forward and violently collided with the enormous dragon claw. Xiao Yan suddenly let out an explosive roar. The strength on the enormous golden fist suddenly increased. The punch smashed the ice dragon in front of him until it was forced back. The seal in Xiao Yan's hand changed once again. An ancient god seal from the god seal skill was unleashed by Xiao Yan. His palm slammed into the enormous dragon's body and heavily sent it flying. Xiao Yan's body also began to change. He gradually became taller. Within a short couple of breaths, Xiao Yan had transformed into a 99-foot-tall golden giant. Xiao Yan looked at the enormous dragon that had flown in front of him. The remaining 5 ice dragons looked at the ice dragon that had been beaten back. Waves of low roars were emitted from their mouths. They used ferocious eyes to stare at Xiao Yan as they surrounded him. Since I can't avoid it, let's have a good fight. Xiao Yan parted his mouth and smiled. An explosive roar was emitted from his mouth. He looked at the 5 ice dragons that were surrounding him and his enormous body suddenly charged toward them. His enormous fist violently attacked the head of one of the ice dragons while his other hand once again slammed out with the ancient god seal. His enormous foot was unwilling to fall behind. The grade 8 collapse, which he had not used for a long time, was kicked toward another enormous dragon. He had even used the yellow spring divine anger. Moo. Moo. Although the strength of Xiao Yan's attacks was quite strong and each of them was ruthless, the 5 enormous dragons were not weak either. They merely became sluggish for an instant under the yellow spring divine anger. An instant later, they once again charged toward Xiao Yan. These enormous dragons were agglomerated from the bone-chilling flame. Moreover, they were the attacking method of the formation. Seeing that those incomparably powerful attacks were about to arrive, the bodies of each enormous dragon ignited with a white flame. Their mouths also spat out numerous flame light beams. Finally, they merged together and transformed into a thick flame light pillar that shot toward Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan's expression was solemn when he saw this. The strength of each of these enormous dragons was about the same as his. At this moment, these enormous dragons had merged their attacks together. The strength of their attacks had soared by several times. Xiao Yan watched the flame light beam that was becoming increasingly close to him. He extended both of his hands forward until they were level with his chest. A bang sounded and a brilliant flame rose from his palm. Both of his hands were violently slammed together. The flame in Xiao Yan's hand soared and the flame instantly wrapped around Xiao Yan's hand. Xiao Yan watched the 5 enormous dragons that were becoming increasingly close. The dou qi within his body was wildly poured into the heavenly flame in his hand. The movement of his hand also became increasingly fast. A couple of breaths later, Xiao Yan's enormous golden body suddenly collided with the flame light beam. He used his body to forcefully block the light beam. The flame in his hand became increasingly bright. When Xiao Yan risked his injured body to charge in front of the 5 enormous dragons, he suddenly pushed his right hand forward. An incomparably beautiful lotus flower flew out from Xiao Yan's hand and flew toward the 5 enormous dragons. Xiao Yan watched the 5 enormous dragons that were becoming increasingly close. At the same time, Xiao Yan's mouth roared wildly. Buddha's angry lotus. Explode. Boom. A loud sound reverberated throughout the cave. Xiao Yan's huge body crashed into the cave's stone wall. Cracks like a spider web spread out around Xiao Yan. The 5 dragons were also sent flying with wounds all over their bodies. Together with the ice dragon, they were embedded into the stone wall. Boom. Xiao Yan's enormous feet violently stomped on the shattered rock wall. His enormous body abruptly shot toward the hole in the middle of the rock platform. Xiao Yan's enormous body also returned to its original appearance after flying out. One could see that his face was somewhat pale and traces of blood hung from the corner of his mouth. His white robe was extremely messy and he appeared to be in an extremely miserable state. However, his body, which was charging forward, still gave people a kind of powerful feeling that was filled with strength. It caused people to feel an invisible, powerful pressure that could not be compared with. It was as though everything in this world was under his feet. Roar. Suddenly, a dragon's roar resounded in the air. The 6 ice dragons disappeared and were replaced by a huge dragon that took up 1/5 of the space in the cave. Xiao Yan's body had just landed on the platform when he quickly dodged to the side. A huge dragon's tail instantly swept past the spot where Xiao Yan had just been. It brought about a gust of wild wind, causing the clothes on Xiao Yan's body to flutter. The biting cold wind brought about by the dragon's tail caused Xiao Yan's skin to feel waves of piercing pain as if it was being cut by a knife. Xiao Yan's body continued to flash. Finally, he stopped at the edge of the platform. His eyes were filled with a solemn expression. The huge body of the ice dragon continued to hover above the cave entrance. Xiao Yan glanced at the Tushi ancient emperor statue, whose corner had been shattered by a single attack. A suspicious expression appeared in his eyes. However, he did not have time to think too much about it. The huge dragon attacked once again. Its claw slammed down towards Xiao Yan's head. If this claw were to land, Xiao Yan would definitely die on the spot. Xiao Yan did not hesitate. His right palm struck out. At the same time, his mouth was wide open. His left hand pointed towards the huge dragon's head. Yellow spring palm. Yellow spring finger. Yellow spring divine wrath. Moo. Moo. The huge dragon was just about to make a move. However, when it saw that finger, its 2 dragon claws rose together and furiously clawed down towards Xiao Yan's hands. Its huge dragon eyes were filled with fury. This was because Xiao Yan did not use any finger to use the yellow spring finger. Instead, he used his middle finger. This time, it caused the ice dragon to be truly furious. Boom. This time around, Xiao Yan and it both retreated 1,000 feet. However, the huge dragon did not give Xiao Yan any chance to catch his breath. The moment it stopped, its entire body emitted an ice-cold aura that caused one's heart to palpitate. However, within that cold aura, there was also an extremely wild and overbearing flame aura. It caused one to feel that the temperature of one's entire body was constantly changing between extreme cold and extreme heat. Roar. The huge dragon suddenly shot out a beam of light from its mouth. That beam of light was incomparably dazzling. It enveloped the huge dragon and turned it into a part of that beam of light as it shot towards Xiao Yan. The power of this attack was enough to shake the heavens and destroy the void. It was as if everything in this attack was nothing but ants and nothingness. Xiao Yan's expression was extremely solemn. In the center of his palm, the heavenly flame appeared. The heavenly flame constantly revolved in the center of his palm, faster and faster. Finally, it formed a ring of flame. The ring of flame constantly rotated and absorbed the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. In the center of the ring of flame, a thumb-sized black spot constantly spread until it covered the entire center of the ring of flame. Xiao Yan looked at the energy beam that was getting closer and closer to him. The ring of flame in his hand was horizontally erected. The black part in the middle of the ring of flame was aimed at the energy beam. Xiao Yan lightly spat out 4 words from his mouth. Buddha's Wrath Reincarnation. Boom. Between heaven and earth, an incomparably wild wave of energy swept out from a tall mountain peak in the distant forest. Within a radius of thousands of miles, no matter if it was a human or a magical beast, there was no survivors. Chapter 18. Bang. The smoke and dust within the mountain cave had completely scattered. 2 figures were standing opposite each other on a platform that was not considered very large. They stood on both ends of the platform. An enormous ice dragon was crawling behind the white-colored figure in front of it. The smoke and dust that permeated the sky automatically scattered a couple of feet in front of the old man, allowing one to clearly see his face. That person was wearing a plain white long robe. Both of his hands were placed behind his back. His icy blue long hair was draped over his shoulders. His face had some traces of the vicissitudes of life. At a glance, he did not appear any different from an ordinary old man. However, the smile that was revealed on the corner of his mouth caused one to feel a mysterious and unfathomable feeling. At this moment, the corner of this old man's mouth contained a smile and a trace of helplessness as he looked at the shocked face of Xiao Yan opposite him. Xiao Yan looked at this somewhat familiar old man. His usually calm face was filled with a rich shock at this moment. This was because the person who was currently standing opposite of Xiao Yan was none other than the enormous stone statue, the Tushi ancient god. Hey! Brat, are you planning to destroy this old man's cave dwelling? That old man's eyes carried some mockery as he looked at Xiao Yan and spoke. However, Xiao Yan was stunned after hearing these words. Cave dwelling? Did that not mean that this heavenly flame spirit did not seal itself? Instead, it was in a retreat to train. In other words, not only had he destroyed the other party's home, he had also disturbed the other party's retreat. Xiao Yan was stunned. He had fought for a long time before barging into this place. However, in the end, this place was actually the other party's retreat. When he thought about the restriction from before, wasn't it used to chase away and deter those with weak strength? Xiao Yan's face twitched when he thought of this. In this way, everything that he had done had become a disturbance to the other party's retreat. Then, wouldn't the heavenly flame that he was about to obtain become a joke? As everyone knew, it was most taboo to disturb a practitioner when they were in a retreat. This was because if the person in retreat was in the midst of a breakthrough and someone outside suddenly interrupted the breakthrough of the person in retreat, then the offense was equivalent to a life and death grudge. This was because once the breakthrough was interrupted, the mottled and chaotic natural energy within the practitioner's body would not be able to be suppressed and refined. It would rampage within the practitioner's body, destroying the practitioner's channels and causing the do-chi within the practitioner's body to go berserk, and there was the danger of an explosion. If this kind of thing happened, the practitioner's future would be destroyed and his cultivation would stagnate. At this moment, it was clear that Xiao Yan had already violated the rules of the continent. However, it was fine if he had violated it. However, looking at this seemingly amiable-looking old man in front of him, Xiao Yan admitted that if the two of them were to face each other, he might not be able to receive even one attack from the other party. Xiao Yan's expression became increasingly solemn. However, the huge dragon behind the old man roared softly a few times for some unknown reason. When the plain-clothed old man heard this, he immediately turned his head around and glared fiercely at the huge dragon. The huge dragon hurriedly shut its mouth and no longer made any noise. However, from its pair of huge dragon eyes, one could sense that it was watching a joke. This caused Xiao Yan to feel a little strange. Suddenly, Xiao Yan seemed to have thought of something. He abruptly raised his head towards the plain-clothed old man. He stared at the old man and opened his mouth to speak. You are an emperor tier medicinal pill, right? Otherwise, why would you have the appearance of the Tushi ancient god? You should also be a medicinal pill refined by the Tushi ancient god, right? Puff. The plain-clothed old man, who had originally taken out a bottle of wine and was drinking, suddenly spat out a mouthful of wine that he had yet to swallow. The wind blew and it landed on the old man's wrinkled old face. The old man ignored the wine that landed on his face. His face was filled with fury as he looked at Xiao Yan. The huge dragon behind him opened its dragon mouth and trembled intensely. It was short of letting out an earth-shaking dragon roar. Its pair of huge dragon eyes were filled with tears that were being held back. Xiao Yan also seemed to have realized that he had said something wrong. However, there was no way to salvage the situation. Hence, he could only quietly stand in the same spot and wait for the plain-clothed old man's reply. A moment later, the old man finally reacted. He curled his lips and said to Xiao Yan, "Little brat, an emperor-tier embryonic pill is able to leave such a deep impression on you. You are really a poor brat who has never seen the world. All right, follow me. This old man will personally tell you who I am and let you have some knowledge. Otherwise, heh. On this continent, your eyesight is only passable in the outer region. However, once you reach the central region of the continent, TSK. The plain-clothed old man emitted waves of laughter as he spoke. Xiao Yan continued to curl his lips when he heard this. However, at the same time, he became even more curious about this old man. This plain-clothed old man clearly knew him very well. It seemed that there were still many things about him that he did not know. Xiao Yan followed the plain-clothed old man into the large hall that the old man had previously been in. Xiao Yan saw 3 words written in flamboyant calligraphy on the signboard of the large hall. Serene Bone Palace. Xiao Yan glanced at it briefly before continuing to follow the plain-clothed old man into the large hall. After entering the large hall, Xiao Yan found that it was no different from some of the ordinary discussion halls. The only difference was that there were only 2 chairs and a prayer mat in the entire large hall. Xiao Yan was unable to figure out just what use they had, so he simply skipped over them. The plain-clothed old man gestured for Xiao Yan to sit on one of the chairs. The chairs were placed together and there was a table between them. Xiao Yan directly sat on the chair and did not say anything. He quietly sat on the chair. Xiao Yan knew that he would be able to find out the doubts in his heart soon. Sure enough, the plain-clothed old man also sat down after Xiao Yan sat down. He waved his sleeve and a tea set appeared. It was accompanied by a steaming hot mist that scattered within the large hall. This old man is called Gu Yu. My original form is the bone-chilling flame. It is a heavenly flame that can incinerate everything in the world. I have followed the Tu Shi ancient god here in the past and have been waiting here in accordance with the Tu Shi ancient god's orders. Gu Yu's tone was filled with a sense of disdain when he spoke. His old face was filled with an arrogant expression. However, Xiao Yan could hear the hidden meaning in his words. Gu Yu was actually waiting for someone. Since Gu Yu had spoken in front of Xiao Yan, it was likely that he was waiting for someone. Xiao Yan's heart suddenly became anxious when he thought of this. He did not know why, but Xiao Yan had a special feeling. He needed strength, a very powerful strength. This was also the reason why Xiao Yan continued to advance towards the large mountain. He hesitated for a moment before asking Gu Yu. I think I can interpret what you just said to mean that you're waiting for someone. If you're waiting for someone, then that person is me, right? Gu Yu nodded and continued, my mission is to help you obtain all the contents of your cultivation method and help you cultivate it to the great success stage. Xiao Yan was originally engrossed in listening, but he suddenly heard the complete content of his qi method. Xiao Yan immediately lifted his head when he heard this. His eyes were filled with disbelief as he stared intently at the plain-clothed old man in front of him. Xiao Yan naturally understood the words of the plain-clothed old man. The qi method that the plain-clothed old man spoke of was naturally the qi method that Xiao Yan practiced, flame mantra. Xiao Yan's throat made a gulping sound as he swallowed a mouthful of saliva with great difficulty. His eyes were filled with excitement as he looked at the plain-clothed old man. His entire body trembled because of his excitement. It was a long while later before Xiao Yan opened his mouth and asked in a somewhat hoarse voice. Are you saying that there is a second part to the flame mantra? The flame mantra can be further strengthened? The plain-clothed old man heard Xiao Yan's hoarse voice and knew that Xiao Yan was extremely excited at this moment. Hence, he did not joke around. Instead, he nodded to Xiao Yan in acknowledgement. Xiao Yan was extremely excited when he saw this. He was just about to open his mouth to ask when Gu Yu opened his mouth and spoke again. Although I will help you cultivate the burning flame mantra to the advanced stage, you will still need to obtain the entire cultivation method by yourself. This is because even if it's me, I only have a fifth of the complete burning flame mantra. The other 4 parts are in the hands of the other 4 fellows. Whether or not you can obtain them will all depend on you. Xiao Yan's eyes were originally looking at Gu Yu with a sigh. However, he shrank back when he heard the latter part of the sentence. His face was depressed as he looked at Gu Yu. Gu Yu was also depressed and helpless. This was something that the Tu Shi ancient god had done back then. Why was it all blamed on him? However, Xiao Yan reacted a moment later and continued to ask. You said that the other 4 parts are in the hands of the other 4 people. Could it be that you know who those 4 people are? Why don't you snatch them back? Xiao Yan was just about to continue asking when he seemed to have suddenly thought of something. His eyes were shocked as he looked at Gu Yu. Or perhaps, you are not a match for those 4 fellows. Every one of them is stronger than you. Gu Yu was listening to Xiao Yan make wild guesses about the whereabouts of the 4 parts of the qi method. However, when he suddenly heard Xiao Yan's words, his eyes immediately became excited. He suddenly let out a wild roar and said, Junior. How can you speak of your elders in such a manner? How can those 4 old fellows be a match for the old me? Moreover, the old me has already obtained a successor. How can they be compared with the old me? Gu Yu seemed to have suddenly recalled that he had said something. He turned his head and saw Xiao Yan's dark and sinister expression. Gu Yu was suddenly stunned on the spot and did not say anything. Only when Xiao Yan opened his eyes and looked at Gu Yu did Gu Yu sigh. Little fellow, it seems that you have purposely said this because you are certain that the old me will not hurt you. All right. In any case, I will have to tell you sooner or later. The old me is Gu Yu. I am the guardian of one of the 5 flame-sealed points, the Serene Bone Point. Back then, the Tushi ancient god was the original bodies of the 5 of us. Back then, the Tushi ancient god was born on the Do-Chi continent and merged with many heavenly flames. Finally, he reached the peak of this continent. On the day he broke through, the world trembled. Fire rain fell from the sky and incinerated everything. It was just like a calamity on the continent. The land continued to tremble. Magma shot into the sky like spring water. It corresponded with the fire rain and turned the sky into a sea of fire. The entire continent turned into a purgatory. When the Tushi ancient god saw this, he used his great ability to summon the life energy of the world and reshaped everything on the continent. All life in the world was able to survive. 100 years later, the Tushi ancient god wanted to return to this world after having tasted everything in the world. However, there was a secret on the continent that had yet to be resolved. Hence, he left his inheritance behind and waited for the fated person to come and obtain it. However, he was afraid that it would be snatched away by a bully. Hence, he separated the 5 of us from his body and ordered us to choose a successor. He scattered his cultivation and disappeared from this world. You should be aware that the old me has spoken until this point, right? Finally, Gu Yu exhaled a long breath. Only then did he speak with some agitation in his heart. Xiao Yan nodded. However, he quickly raised his head and frowned as he asked Gu Yu. Since the Tushi ancient god disappeared on this continent, what is the matter with the Tushi ancient god mansion on the Do-Chi continent? Don't tell me that you do not allow a living person to leave behind a mansion? It is merely a mansion. What is there to make a fuss about? Gu Yu's eyebrows were involuntarily lifted when he heard this. He spoke in a calm voice. Xiao Yan continued to look at Gu Yu in a somewhat doubtful manner, but he was unable to see anything. Finally, he could only give up on thinking about it. However, his heart suddenly felt a little lost when he looked at the heavenly flame square on the distant Do-Chi continent. It seemed that there was something that he was unaware of that attracted him, but he was interrupted by Gu Yu. However, Xiao Yan still blurted out a sentence in his dazed state. Why does that heavenly flame square seem to have been seen somewhere before? Gu Yu's eyes suddenly shrank upon hearing this. Chapter 19. 2 white-robed figures were seated opposite each other in an icy blue hall. One of them was old while the other was young. Both of them held teacups in their hands as they sipped tea. Suddenly, Xiao Yan asked Gu Yu. Elder Gu Yu, since you said that you are from the Serene Bone Point, one of the 5 flame-sealed points, I believe that the other 4 people should be from the 5 flame-sealed points, right? Gu Yu was not surprised when he heard this. Instead, he nodded and put down the teacup in his hand. That's right. The 5 flame-sealed meridian is formed by the union of 5 different heavenly flames. As long as one of the 5 heavenly flames still has its intelligence, the 5 flame-sealed meridian will not disappear and will continue to exist in this world. The other 4 people in the 5 flame-sealed meridian are located in 4 different directions on this continent. They are also the people who have grasped the other 4 parts of the burning flame mantra. However, our missions are different from each other and the degree of the test is also different. At that time, whether or not you can obtain the remnant chi method of the burning flame mantra will depend on you. As for who the 4 of them are, I can only tell you about 2 of them. As for the other 2, not to mention you, even I would find it very difficult to find them. Thus, I won't say anything more. Finding them will depend on your luck. Gu Yu explained the identities of the 2 people to Xiao Yan. One of them was known as Old Hai. His name was Hai Machin. His original form was the Sea Heart Flame. He was located in the northern part of the continent. There was a vast ocean there, and the 5 flame-sealed points that he was guarding was also there. That old man has established some North Sea Academy there. Perhaps you can go and take a look. It is just a broken academy. It is not a big deal. Gu Yu glanced to the side and curled his lips. Xiao Yan did not take it to heart and continued to listen. However, just because Xiao Yan did not take it to heart, it did not mean that others would not take it to heart. While Gu Yu uttered these words, a green-robed old man in a wooden house far away in the northern sea sneezed for no reason. After which, he frowned and muttered to himself, Brother Gu Yu, this old man's face is very old. Oh. Which old fellow is speaking ill of this old man again? Gu Yu continued to explain to Xiao Yan on his own. The second person is a woman. However, Gu Yu raised his voice a lot, but at the same time, he was a little cautious. Then, he said. He continued, don't underestimate this woman. It is fine if she is an ordinary woman, but not everyone can handle her. This woman is arrogant and unsociable. She is indifferent to others. However, it was precisely because of this that she had only accepted one disciple. Moreover, if it wasn't for the fact that her disciple's personality was similar to hers, she probably wouldn't have been able to stand her. Alright, I've already told you about her danger. Let me tell you about her main body. Her original form is the Red Lotus Hellfire. She is known as Yi Honglian or Lady Red Lotus. She lives in the fire maple forest in the extreme south. She is in closed-door training all year round. Only her disciple is outside. Therefore, if you want to go there, I suggest that you should first look for that old fellow, Hai Machin. He is much easier to talk to than Yi Honglian. Moreover, that old fellow is fond of wine. Perhaps, as long as you prepare some good wine, that old fellow will follow you. Haha. Gu Yu spoke as if Hai Machin was following him. When Xiao Yan heard Gu Yu's words, he raised his eyebrows. His eyes were instantly filled with excitement. He had chatted with Gu Yu for so long because he wanted Gu Yu to follow him. However, now that he heard Gu Yu's words, it seemed that Gu Yu and the other four were going to follow the inheritor of the Tushi ancient emperor. In this way, he would be able to obtain 5 heavenly flames that had existed for more than 1,000 years without much trouble. TSK, these heavenly flames were more powerful than 4 or 5 ordinary heavenly flames. Xiao Yan was thinking happily in his heart. Gu Yu glanced at him and shook his head, saying, don't think about it. Don't even think about it. If it was as simple as you think, I would have left with you long ago. Even though the 5 of us have to follow the inheritor, we still need to see if the inheritor has enough talent and strength to make us gasp in admiration. With your current strength, if you didn't meet me, the others wouldn't have been able to do it. Xiao Yan was startled for a moment before he recovered. He lifted his brows and parted his mouth. His eyes looked at Gu Yu. His face was filled with curiosity. Xiao Yan naturally knew that since the 5 seniors were going to follow him, they would definitely be accompanied by many difficult tests. For example, Xiao Yan had entered Gu Yu's cave dwelling. Although Gu Yu did not personally participate in the test of Xiao Yan's strength, he definitely knew about it. Otherwise, he would not be able to smile when facing a stranger like Xiao Yan after his cultivation was disturbed. Gu Yu had explained so much to Xiao Yan. Of course, it was not something that Xiao Yan could get from 1 or 2 seemingly scheming words. After all, Gu Yu was an expert who had lived for thousands of years. How could Xiao Yan, who was only 50 years old, be compared to him? Although Xiao Yan was not young, he was just like a child to Gu Yu. Gu Yu sighed. He helplessly glanced at Xiao Yan and said, the test of the test is simple. The reason why the old me's test is so simple is because firstly, I have considered that you have just arrived at this place and your strength is relatively weak. Therefore, the strength of the formation is about the same as yours. After the fusion, it is only slightly stronger than yours, allowing you to have a chance to catch your breath. It is just that the old me did not expect that you actually possess a human tier do technique. Therefore, you were able to pass this test of mine so easily. Secondly, this is the old me's personal reason. The old me thinks that you are not bad, so I have purposely given you special treatment. You must remember how well the old me has treated you. Gu Yu had been serious at the start, but he began to joke halfway through his words, causing Xiao Yan to feel speechless. Speaking of which, you should be careful. The difficulty of this old man's test is worlds apart from the most basic requirement. It might be fine if you end up at old man Hai's place. I might be able to help you finish him off. However, if you end up at Yi Honglen's place, TSK, you should just say that you have never seen me. Otherwise, this old man does not know if you will be able to return alive. If you are unlucky and end up meeting those 2 demons, you can just act like you don't know anything. The 2 of them are extremely stubborn. Gu Yu reminded Xiao Yan with a solemn expression when he reached the end of his words. Xiao Yan also felt extremely shocked when he heard this. Even the formation today did not have the qualification to test him. Just how difficult would the real test be? However, this gave Xiao Yan sufficient time and motivation to grow. The growth of his strength was only a matter of time. As for motivation, with the remnant flame mantra as his motivation, Xiao Yan naturally did not need to worry. Xiao Yan mused for a moment before looking at Gu Yu. He asked, Old Gu, can I address you as such? Gu Yu nodded. Xiao Yan continued. Since I have already passed Old Gu's test, does this mean that this junior can obtain the remnant flame mantra in Old Gu's hands? Xiao Yan extended his hand towards Gu Yu as he spoke. Gu Yu shook his head when he saw this. He felt a little apologetic as he looked at Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan said, no. No, back then, on one hand, the Tushi ancient emperor wanted to ensure that the burning flame would not be lost, and on the other hand, it was another test for the inheritor. He fused the incomplete burning flame mantra into the bodies of the 5 of us, and unless you refine the heavenly flame's origin flame, you will not be able to obtain it. At most, you can only keep me in your body, and wait until you have enough strength before fusing with me. Furthermore, the fusion process is also extremely dangerous, and when you fuse with my origin flame, my soul will be automatically erased. This is also to prevent the inheritor from leaving behind any strange after effects after refining the heavenly flame. Xiao Yan's large eyes stared at his small eyes. His face twitched slightly. This was really something. He clearly had a treasure, but could only look at it. How could anyone endure this? Unfortunately, Xiao Yan had no choice but to accept it even if he did not want to. However, this was also good. This way, he would have a powerful free fighter by his side in the future. The corners of Xiao Yan's mouth curled up as a calm, old voice rang in his ears. He heard Gu Yu say, don't think too much. Don't think too much about it. This old man will not help you. Even if your life is in danger, I will not help you. Gu Yu's words were very firm. Even Xiao Yan could not tell that he was joking. Hence, Xiao Yan only glanced at Gu Yu and did not say anything else. A moment later, Xiao Yan finally opened his mouth and asked Gu Yu, seemingly in an attempt to break this somewhat quiet atmosphere. I wonder if Elder Gu can explain the origin of the burning flame art to me. Since the effect of the burning flame art is so powerful, it should not have been created by some unknown person, right? I hope Elder Gu can answer Xiao Yan's question. Xiao Yan's tone was full of desire for knowledge. This was the first time in Xiao Yan's history that he had such a strong desire. However, this was normal. After all, the creator of the burning flame art was definitely not an ordinary person. Knowing the origin of the burning flame art would definitely be very exciting. Hence, Gu Yu felt a little proud of himself when Xiao Yan asked this question. Gu Yu parted his mouth and smiled. He revealed a row of old yellow teeth in his mouth as he looked at Xiao Yan. He acted as though this little fellow had improved. The burning flame art. Yes. The creator of this cultivation method was indeed an impressive and domineering individual. That person reached the pinnacle with just this burning flame mantra. He used the power of flames to forcefully create a world and saved countless people from the abyss of suffering. His might shook the heavens. Gu Yu's tone became more and more excited as he spoke. However, he suddenly became like a deflated balloon. His soaring aura instantly fell back to its original point. Gu Yu's tone was indifferent and did not change at all. Unfortunately, in the end, he died at the hands of his brothers. A peak expert of a generation died alone because of a few brothers. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Yan felt that the atmosphere in the hall had become deathly silent. In just an instant, it returned to its original state. However, Xiao Yan felt as if he had experienced an era. It was only when Gu Yu snorted that Xiao Yan woke up. Xiao Yan's face revealed a horrified expression as he looked at Gu Yu. It was unexpected that just the memories of an ancient expert could stir one's emotions. He really wondered just what kind of strength this expert would possess if he was still alive. Alright, I won't talk to you anymore. Let's leave after I seal this place. Gu Yu said indifferently. When Xiao Yan heard this, he sorted out his thoughts and did not say anything else. He followed Gu Yu out of the hall. After exiting the hall, Gu Yu took a deep look at the serene bone hall that he had stayed in for thousands of years. He slowly raised his hands and seals appeared in his old hands. The ground in front of the hall trembled and a black wall rose from the ground. It firmly blocked the entrance of the hall. Once the wall appeared, Xiao Yan inhaled a deep breath of air. Xiao Yan was unable to recognize what material the wall was made of. However, just based on the fact that Xiao Yan was unable to recognize it, Xiao Yan admitted that he did not have the ability to destroy it even a little. When Gu Yu saw this, he only grinned and did not say anything else. He flew out of the mountain. Chapter 20. Xiao Yan followed Gu Yu out of the dark bone hall deep underground and returned to the cave. Gu Yu and Xiao Yan saw the enormous ice dragon guarding the entrance of the cave the moment they exited. The ice dragon's entire body surrounded the entrance of the cave. A silver-white flame was emitted from the surface of its body. Its entire body emitted a frightening aura that could seize one's soul. It was as though a real dragon had awakened. It gave one a feeling of sacredness and inviolability. An impulse to worship it rose from the bottom of one's heart. Roar. The enormous dragon seemed to have sensed Gu Yu's and Xiao Yan's auras. Its entrenched body flipped and leaped into the air. Its dragon head faced the entrance of the cave and emitted waves of low roars. Two white figures emerged from the entrance of the cave as two sonic booms appeared. They paused in the air and stood side by side. Xiao Yan looked at the ice dragon and smiled. Although this ice dragon was formed from a formation, it possessed intelligence. It was indeed mysterious. Moreover, it seemed to have an extraordinary relationship with Old Gu. It was likely that Old Gu did not treat this ice dragon as a formation. The ice dragon looked at Xiao Yan's warm smile. It opened its large mouth and rubbed its enormous dragon head against Xiao Yan. It also roared a couple of times, causing the entire cave to shake. The dragon breath that was exhaled from its nose caused Xiao Yan's clothes to stick tightly to his skin. This caused Xiao Yan to feel extremely uncomfortable. Gu Yu softly laughed a couple of times. He stroked his beard and smiled as he looked at the ice dragon. There was a trace of reluctance in his eyes. The enormous dragon seemed to have sensed Gu Yu's current emotions. Its enormous dragon head rubbed against Gu Yu's body. A human-like reluctance was revealed in its eyes. Gu Yu extended his hand and rubbed the dragon's head, smoothing out its ice-blue hair. After which, he took a step back and stood in the air. The seal in his hands began to change once again. Wave after wave of intense energy ripples spread around his body, forming a water-like energy ripple. The seal in Gu Yu's hands continued to change. Milky white energy light beams continuously shot out from his hands and disappeared into the ice dragon's body. The enormous body of the ice dragon lit up with waves of hazy white light. Its originally energetic state had become sluggish. It gradually fell from the sky and curled into a ball. Its eyes were shut, and it appeared like an old man who was about to fall asleep. However, Xiao Yan could sense that this was not because the ice dragon had been weakened. Instead, Gu Yu was gathering all the energy that he had released back into the ice dragon's body. From the looks of it, Gu Yu was not only sealing the energy, but he was also putting the ice dragon into a deep slumber. It was likely that the ice dragon would sleep forever if no one triggered this formation in the future. Since Gu Yu had used all his means to hide the Serene Bone Palace, it was impossible for it to be easily discovered by others. As a result, it was even more impossible for the ice dragon to wake up. Xiao Yan involuntarily sighed when he thought of this. Although it was a formation, they had been together for 1,000 years and had been friends for 1,000 years. Being a servant of the formation had long become a thing of the past. However, no one could accept such an outcome. Gu Yu took a very long time to set up the formation. However, Xiao Yan was very cooperative and did not say anything. Instead, he opened up a wide space and quietly waited by the side. Forget about anyone else, Xiao Yan was the first person who could not complete the task quickly after parting with an old friend. After Xiao Yan patiently waited for a couple of hours, Gu Yu finally slowly walked over to Xiao Yan with a bitter expression on his old face. Gu Yu smiled at Xiao Yan when he arrived in front of him. Without saying anything, he stepped forward and led Xiao Yan to the exit. In order to not activate the formation, Gu Yu had no choice but to lead Xiao Yan to the exit of the formation. They walked left and right, one step at a time, above the endless abyss. Xiao Yan's face was filled with caution as Gu Yu led the way. This was not because he did not trust Gu Yu. It was just that this endless abyss caused one's back to break out in a cold sweat. Even Xiao Yan could not bear it. Hence, he was also a little cautious. Gu Yu ignored Xiao Yan's feelings and continued to lead the way. The atmosphere along the way was very oppressive. Only when the two of them saw the light that belonged to the sun in the distance did Gu Yu change his earlier gloomy mood. He smiled and said to Xiao Yan, "Let's go. Let this old man see what kind of outstanding people there are on this continent. I wonder who is stronger compared to the person chosen by the Shi ancient god beside me." Ha ha. Gu Yu increased his speed as he spoke and flew toward the light. Back then, the reason why Xiao Yan had taken so long to enter this cave was because the heat waves that had been blown out of the mountain had blocked him. Now, however, that heat wave had been broken by Xiao Yan. Although it had not been completely broken, the heat wave that had been formed by the bone-chilling flame had naturally disappeared with Gu Yu, the owner of the cave. The speed at which Xiao Yan exited the cave was naturally much faster. Within a couple of breaths, the two of them had rushed out of the cave that was tens of thousands of feet deep. Even Gu Yu involuntarily narrowed his eyes when he came out. The originally tall mountain no longer existed. Only the large rocks, which were thousands of feet wide, and the thick layer of dust that covered the ground, told everyone that an enormous creature had once fallen in this place. A towering mountain, which could allow a bird's eye view of the continent, had once fallen in this place. Unfortunately, no one could see everything here. No one knew that there had once been a huge mountain here. No one knew that there had once been a small square here. No one knew about all of this. Who? Guyu slowly opened his eyes and exhaled a mouthful of turbid air that had been suppressed in his chest. He lifted his head and looked at the empty space above his head. A bright and dazzling silver-white flame light was emitted from his eyes. His body suddenly shot toward the sky as his cold eyes stared at the heavens. Xiao Yan frowned as he looked at Guyu's strange actions. He involuntarily guessed in his heart. Could it be that old Gu wanted to set up some kind of formation or restriction? Before Xiao Yan could come up with an answer, he saw Guyu's body flash as he shot into the sky. He stood on the highest cliff and placed his hands behind his back. His eyes were filled with a silver-white flame as he stared at the heavens. Suddenly, Guyu laughed in a deafening manner. His laughter shook the heavens and the earth. It deterred all the magical beasts within a 10,000-kilometer radius and shook the world. Ha 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 ha, this old man is Guyu. I have waited for 1,000 years. Today, I have finally found a successor. Since this old man was born by the world, this old man will swear today that the world gave birth to me and I will become a transcendent being for the world. I will become one with the world. Xiao Yan's pupils suddenly shrank when these words were spoken. His expression suddenly changed. Just as Guyu's words left his mouth, the clear sky in the distance was now filled with churning dark clouds and roaring thunder. However, Guyu's expression did not change at all. Instead, he quietly stood at the top of the cliff and quietly watched the thunderbolts that caused even Xiao Yan's heart to palpitate continuously explode beside him. Xiao Yan swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He was stunned as he watched all of this. The corner of his eyes continued to twitch. He could clearly sense that the thunderbolts that descended from the sky were not ordinary thunderbolts. These thunderbolts might appear no different from ordinary thunderbolts from the outside, but judging from the strength that erupted when the thunderbolts exploded, Xiao Yan did not have the confidence to endure even a single one of them. He did not even have the slightest confidence in being able to endure the aftershocks. How? How much power does he have to be able to cause such a huge amount of damage? Even a Dodi is merely an ant. Xiao Yan's voice trembled as he muttered to himself. Hey! Brat, have you been scared silly? Guyu had coincidentally come down from the cliff at this moment. He involuntarily teased Xiao Yan when he saw his stunned appearance. Only then did Xiao Yan react. The thunderbolts in the sky had already disappeared. The dark clouds had also scattered. Xiao Yan turned around and saw Guyu standing in front of him. He immediately opened his mouth to ask, but Guyu was one step ahead of him. He heard Guyu slowly speak. That kind of heavenly lightning is called the Nine Heavens Divine Lightning. It can destroy everything in the world that is extremely dark and evil. It is the nemesis of all evil things in the world, but it is also used to imprison people. It is a divine object that is used to make the heavenly lightning oath. It possesses the might of the world and can shake the heavens. Xiao Yan was startled when he heard this. He did not expect his thoughts to be too one-sided. Originally, he had thought that with old Gu's strength, the Nine Heavens Divine Lightning would at most be on par with him regardless of how powerful it was. However, he did not expect the heavenly lightning to be so powerful. Even old Gu was restrained by it. Alright, let's go. This heavenly lightning is very powerful. You will come to understand how powerful it is in the future. The most important thing now is to find a city so that you can understand the situation of this continent. This will allow you to know how to survive on this continent. Guyu's words had just sounded when he turned into a ray of light that entered Xiao Yan's body. Xiao Yan was initially startled. He then asked curiously, Old Gu, what are you doing? Hey, the two little guys in your body are still injured. If they slowly recuperate, it will take at least 3 or 4 months. If this old man doesn't enter your body, how can I heal them quickly? Besides, this old man's strength is not weak. But you, kid, don't be too optimistic. As long as this old man is outside, even if you meet someone who is stronger than you, who would dare to touch you? Have you thought of this before? Hey. Guyu grinned as he replied to Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan was stunned when he heard this. After which, he no longer spoke. He curled his lips and flew out of the forest. Xiao Yan frowned a long while later. He looked at the vast forest in the distance. Xiao Yan had already used his spiritual strength to investigate earlier. There was an endless green forest within 1,000 miles. No matter how Xiao Yan searched, he could not find any way out. Xiao Yan was helpless. He could only ask Guyu in his heart, Old Gu, what is the situation now? Elder Bone, what's the situation now? I wonder if you can help us scout the surroundings and see if we can find a path with human aura. Otherwise, if we continue to walk without a goal like this, we won't be able to walk out in our lifetime. Therefore, we can only ask Elder Bone for help. Guyu laughed when he heard this. After which, he slowly opened his mouth and said, Xia Yan, you should pay attention to what you say next time. If anything happens, you will be the only one who will not be able to leave. This old man will not be around. Alright, I will not play with you for now. Go to the southeast. There is a human's aura 8,000 miles away. You should be able to use him to leave this forest. Xiao Yan was in a good mood when he heard this. His body moved and he flew in that direction. A moment later, Xiao Yan's advancing body slowly came to a stop. His gaze looked down. At this moment, on the ground below, there was a young human figure whose entire body was covered in blood fighting with an enormous wolf-shaped magical beast. From the surface, the magical beast appeared to have suffered quite a serious injury. However, it was in a much better condition than the human. Therefore, as time slowly flowed by, the young human figure finally paused for a moment. The wolf-shaped magical beast grabbed this opportunity and clawed at the young human's chest. The young human was blasted away and broke 4 to 5 large trees before he came to a stop. However, the enormous wolf did not give up on the opportunity to kill him. Its claw once again pierced toward the young human's chest. If this claw struck, the young human would definitely die. The human's eyes were filled with unwillingness as he slowly closed them, waiting for the next moment of death. Swoosh! A sharp sound broke through the air and the huge wolf fell to the ground. The young human figure opened his eyes once again and saw the white-robed figure on the tree branch. His head tilted to the side and he fainted.